You were told that salvation requires a church, that sin is your prison and faith is the key. But what if the real prison wasn't sin at all? What if it was the entire system claiming to free you from it? For centuries, the Gnostics whispered a truth so dangerous that scrolls were burned, teachers were silenced, and entire communities were erased. They said the material world itself is the cage, and the Archons, invisible rulers you've never been taught to see, are the ones who built it. The real burial of this knowledge didn't happen in fire alone. It happened in silence, in the careful rewriting of history, in the systematic destruction of texts that dared to describe a cosmos far stranger and more threatening than anything Genesis ever admitted. Because the Gnostics didn't just challenge a few doctrines, they challenged the entire foundation of reality the Church was built upon. In 1945, beneath the cliffs of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a farmer struck his shovel against something unusual. A sealed clay jar buried for over 1,600 years. Inside, wrapped in leather and untouched by time, were 52 texts that would shatter everything the world believed about early Christianity. Among them were the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John, and the Hypostasis of the Archons. These weren't lost scriptures praising the same God, telling the same story. They were describing a different creation entirely. According to these forbidden texts, the material world you live in was not made by the true divine source. It was hijacked, built by a lesser being called the Demiurge, sometimes named Yaldabaoth, a lion-faced, serpent-bodied entity who believed himself to be God. In his arrogance and ignorance, he declared, "I am God, and there is no other." But he was wrong. Above him existed the Pleroma, the fullness of true divine light, a realm he could neither reach nor comprehend. And in his flawed attempt to mimic creation, Yaldabaoth didn't work alone. He spawned the Archons. These weren't fallen angels in the biblical sense. They were cosmic administrators, enforcers of a counterfeit reality. 7 planetary rulers, 12 zodiacal powers aligned with the stars, 365 Archons governing the very days themselves. Together they constructed an invisible prison, a system so subtle that most souls would never realize they were trapped. They ruled over matter, time, and perception itself, ensuring that humanity would remain asleep, distracted, and blind to the divine spark buried within. Here's why this was devastating to the Church. If the Gnostics were right, then the Genesis creation story wasn't the beginning. It was a cover-up. The God of the Old Testament wasn't the ultimate source, but the Demiurge himself, a jealous, wrathful being demanding worship because he feared losing control. And if that was true, then every cathedral, every sacrament, every claim to divine authority became participation in the Archon system. The Church's entire model depended on one God, one creation, one path to salvation through institutional obedience. But the Gnostics offered something far more dangerous. They said salvation didn't come through faith or submission. It came through gnosis, direct knowledge, the remembrance of who you truly are beneath the lies. They said you didn't need a priest to reach God because you already carried a fragment of the divine within you. That idea alone was enough to condemn them, but the Gnostics didn't just describe who built the prison. They mapped exactly how it functions. And once you see the architecture, you can never unsee it. The Archons didn't need chains or walls. They built something far more effective, a system so seamless that prisoners would defend it, believing they were free. The Gnostic texts describe this architecture in startling detail, not as metaphor, but as cosmic bureaucracy. 7 planetary rulers governing the spheres of existence, 12 zodiacal Archons aligned with the stars, and 365 lesser Archons, one for every single day of the year, ensuring that time itself became a prison. This wasn't random, it was deliberate design. The Archons understood something profound about control. You don't enslave a species by force. You enslave them by making them forget they were ever free. According to the hypostasis of the Archons, these beings operate through imitation, not creation. They cannot generate divine light, they can only mimic it, distort it, and feed upon it. They are cosmic parasites, existing in the layers between matter and spirit, ruling through three primary mechanisms that the Gnostics called the chains of Hymermene. The first chain is fate. The Archons weave the illusion that your life is predetermined, that the stars dictate your path, that you're bound by forces beyond your control. Every horoscope, every meant to be, every belief that you're powerless to change your circumstances feeds this lie. They want you to believe the script is written, because if you believe that, you'll never question who wrote it. The second chain is desire, not natural human longing, but endless, insatiable hunger. The kind that's never satisfied. The Archons amplify craving until it becomes identity. You are what you want, you are what you lack. Happiness is always one purchase away, one achievement away, one relationship away. But it never arrives, and every time you chase the next thing, you're feeding energy into their system. Locked in cycles of consumption that distract you from the only question that matters. Who am I beneath this wanting? The third chain is forgetfulness. The Archons' most devastating weapon. They make souls forget their divine origin. You were born into a world that told you you're small, fallen, broken, and in need of saving by external forces. The Gospel of Philip describes this as the kingdom of flesh, a realm where false powers stir confusion until the soul can no longer remember the light it came from. Forgetfulness isn't passive, it's engineered. The Gnostic text, known as the Apocryphon of John, lists the 7 powers that bind the soul: darkness, desire, ignorance, death's allure, the pull of flesh, false wisdom, and wrathful pride. Each one whispers the same lie: this is who you are. But they're distortions, masks worn by the Archons to keep you identified with the prison instead of the divine spark within it. And here's where the Church's problem became existential. If the material world itself is the trap, then what does that say about an institution that built cathedrals, hoarded wealth, and claimed earthly dominion as proof of God's favor? The Gnostics said the Archons rule through matter. They thrive when you believe physical power, physical buildings, physical rituals are the path to the divine. The Church's entire authority depended on matter mattering, on sacraments, on physical resurrection, on the belief that salvation required their earthly institution. But the Gnostics taught the opposite: escape matter, awaken the spark, transcend the system entirely. One teaching liberates, the other controls. And the Church knew exactly which one they represented. So they erased it, burned the scrolls, hunted the teachers, rewrote history so thoroughly that for over 1,000 years the word Archon was forgotten by all but the most hidden circles. But they couldn't erase the one thing the Archons fear most, and that's what we uncover next. So if this is opening your eyes to something you've never seen before, hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications, because the deeper we go into what the Church buried, the stranger and more urgent this becomes. The Archons built a flawless system. They controlled matter, manipulated time, and engineered forgetfulness. But there was one thing they couldn't touch, one element of creation that existed beyond their reach, hidden so deep within humanity that even the rulers of this world couldn't corrupt it. The divine spark. According to the Apocryphon of John, when the Archons created the physical human body, they didn't realize what they were trapping inside it. Sophia, divine wisdom herself, had placed a fragment of the true source within humanity, a spark of uncreated light from the pleroma. The Archons could shape flesh, bind souls to matter, and weave illusions, but they could not destroy this inner flame. It was planted as a safeguard, a code written into the fabric of human consciousness that could never be deleted. This spark is your direct connection to the true divine, the God beyond the demiurge, the source beyond the system. It cannot be controlled, it cannot be owned, it cannot be bought, sold, or mediated by any institution. It simply is. And the moment you remember it exists, the entire archonic illusion begins to crack. Here's why this was unacceptable to the Church. If every human being already carries divinity within them, then priests become unnecessary. Sacraments become theater. The whole hierarchical structure, claiming exclusive access to God, collapses into irrelevance. The Gnostics weren't saying you needed to earn salvation through faith or works. They were saying you never lost it in the first place. You only forgot. That's the revolution the church couldn't allow. So they did what empires always do when threatened by truth. They eliminated the witnesses, but the teaching didn't die. It went underground, preserved by those who recognized its power and refused to let it vanish. After the Nag Hammadi texts were buried in the 4th century, fragments of Gnostic cosmology survived through secret communities scattered across Europe and the Middle East. The Cathars of 12th century southern France taught that the material world was evil, that the God of the Old Testament was the demiurge, and that salvation came through inner gnosis, not church ritual. They rejected every sacrament, every hierarchy, every claim that matter could mediate the divine. The church's response was swift and merciless. In 1209, Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade, a 20-year campaign of slaughter that wiped the Cathars from existence. Entire towns were burned, men, women, and children massacred. When asked how to distinguish heretics from Catholics, the papal legate reportedly said, "Kill them all. God will know his own." In the Balkans, the Bogomils carried the same teaching, the same cosmology, the same dangerous idea that humans didn't need the church to access God. They were hunted, imprisoned, and exterminated across Bulgaria, Bosnia, and beyond. Yet even after centuries of persecution, one group survived. The Mandaeans, an ancient Gnostic sect still practicing in Iraq and Iran, have preserved Archon cosmology in living ritual for over 2,000 years. They speak of the 7 planetary rulers. They perform baptisms to wash away archonic influence. They still remember. Every single one of these groups was targeted for the same reason. Not because they rejected Christ, but because they taught that Christ's message was inner awakening, not institutional submission. They said the kingdom of God is within you, and that made them more dangerous than any army. Even now, after the Nag Hammadi texts were translated and published in the 1970s, making Gnostic cosmology publicly available for the first time in over a millennium, mainstream theology still dismisses it. It's called fringe, esoteric, misguided. Academic study is tolerated, but the application of Gnostic practice is still treated as dangerous spirituality. Why? Because the question remains as threatening today as it was 2,000 years ago. What if the system itself is the prison? And what if you never needed anyone's permission to escape it? The church buried the texts, they silenced the teachers, they erased the names, but they couldn't bury the method, because hidden in those forbidden scrolls was the exact technique for breaking the Archons' hold. The Archons rule through invisibility. Their whispers become your thoughts, their desires become your goals, their fear becomes your prison. But the Gnostics discovered something extraordinary. The moment you see the pattern, you weaken its power. Because the archonic system doesn't survive through force. It survives through your unconscious participation. So how do you break free from a prison you can't see? The answer is deceptively simple, and it's the reason the church worked so hard to bury it. You don't fight the Archons, you see them. In the Gospel of Mary, recently recovered from the sands of Egypt, the Savior tells his followers something profound. Be courageous in the presence of the different forms of nature. This isn't a call to battle, it's a call to awareness. Courage, in the Gnostic sense, means the ability to stand in the storm of illusion without being swept away by it, to witness fear without becoming fear, to observe desire without drowning in it, to see the Archon's influence for what it is, thought patterns, emotional currents, and beliefs that were never truly yours. The Gnostic method is built on a single practice, witnessing without identification. Every time a thought arises, you pause and ask, is this mine? Or is this the prison speaking? Every time an emotion surges, you step back and observe it moving through you rather than claiming you. Every time desire pulls you toward distraction, you recognize the archonic current and choose stillness instead. This isn't suppression. It's illumination. You're not pushing the darkness away. You're switching on the light. And here's the paradox the Archons can't escape. Darkness isn't a force of its own. It's the absence of light. The moment awareness shines, illusion dissolves. You don't need weapons, rituals, or elaborate techniques. You need only to see. The The Gnostics called this simple act of recognition the sword that cuts through every chain. There's even a practice so direct it feels almost too simple to be powerful. When fear, doubt, or confusion arises, you pause, place your awareness on it, and say inwardly, "I see you." That's it. 3 words, but those 3 words withdraw the energy that sustains the illusion. Because the Archons feed on unconscious reaction. The moment you become conscious, the feeding stops. This practice has a name in the Gnostic tradition, anamnesis. The Greek word means unforgetting, a sacred remembering of what you always were. It's not about learning something new. It's about remembering the divine spark that the Archons tried so hard to make you forget. The Gospel of Thomas describes it like this: when you make the two one, when you make the inner as the outer and the outer as the inner, then you will enter the kingdom. The kingdom isn't a place, it's a state of consciousness beyond the archonic illusion. Every moment of true awareness is an act of rebellion. Every breath taken in presence is energy reclaimed. Every time you witness a false thought and refuse to identify with it, you step outside the invisible prison. The Archons thrive on your unconscious participation, but awareness cuts their lifeline. You stop being food for the system and become untouchable. And this is exactly why the Church could never allow this teaching to spread. Because this method requires no intermediary, no priest standing between you and God, no sacrament to purchase grace, no institution to grant permission, just you and the divine spark within, recognizing each other across the void of forgetfulness. Salvation becomes an inner event, not an external transaction. Liberation becomes a shift in perception, not a reward for obedience. The kingdom of heaven stops being a distant promise and becomes a present reality available in every conscious moment. And the Church, with all its cathedrals and hierarchies and claims to exclusive access, becomes completely and utterly unnecessary. That's why Gnostic texts were labeled dangerous. They weren't theological arguments, they were user manuals for spiritual independence. And once enough people learn to use them, the invisible prison loses its power entirely. Because truth doesn't need permission to exist. It only needs to be remembered. Every era, the same story repeats. Knowledge emerges from the ground, from forgotten texts, from whispers that survived the flames. The Church moves to suppress it, teachers are silenced, scrolls are burned. But the truth goes underground, preserved by those who refuse to forget. And then, when the time is right, it resurfaces again. Nag Hammadi in 1945 wasn't the first time Gnostic texts were discovered. The Askew Codex appeared in the late 1700s. The Berlin Codex in 1896. The Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. Each time, fragments of the same cosmology emerged, describing the Archons, the Demiurge, and the invisible prison built to keep humanity asleep. Each time, mainstream institutions dismissed them, marginalized them, or buried them in academic obscurity. But the pattern is undeniable. The truth keeps rising. Why? Because the invisible prison only works when you don't see the bars. And once enough people see them, the architecture weakens. The Archon's power isn't absolute, it's borrowed, stolen from souls who forgot who they were. Every time someone remembers the divine spark within, every time someone withdraws their energy from fear, division, and distraction, a section of the prison dissolves. The Gnostics called this the quiet uprising of consciousness. No armies required, no violent revolution, just awareness spreading like light through darkness. And maybe that's why you're here right now, watching this. Not by accident, not by coincidence, but because something in you is remembering. Something deeper than thought, older than belief, is recognizing the truth beneath the noise. The Archons built a system to keep you distracted, afraid, and endlessly seeking outside yourself. But the moment you turn inward, the moment you realize the divine spark was always there, untouched and uncorrupted, their entire illusion collapses. The Church tried to bury this because they knew what would happen. Once you realize you're already free, their authority ends. Once you understand that salvation isn't a transaction, but a remembering, the cathedrals become empty monuments to a system that never had the power it claimed. The Archons fear awareness because awareness doesn't just dissolve their influence, it renders them irrelevant. So maybe the Archons were never invincible. Maybe their power was always an illusion, sustained only by humanity's forgetfulness. And maybe the prison was never real. Just a story we believed, a dream we agreed to, until enough of us woke up and remembered what the Gnostics tried so hard to preserve. That you are not small, you are not fallen, you are not broken. You are a fragment of the divine source, temporarily inhabiting matter, but never truly bound by it. This isn't ancient history. This is happening now. Every thought you witness instead of becoming. Every illusion you see through. Every moment you choose awareness over reaction. You're not just breaking free. You're dismantling the system itself, because the invisible prison exists only as long as we energize it with unconscious agreement. The moment we remember, the bars dissolve like shadows at dawn. The Gnostics left you a map. The Archons built a prison. But you hold the key. It's called awareness. And it's been inside you this entire time. If something in this resonated, if you felt that quiet pull of recognition, share your thoughts in the comments below. Every awakened voice adds light to the whole, and make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on, because we're just beginning to uncover the forbidden teachings they never wanted you to find. The deeper we go, the more the invisible prison reveals itself. Do you see the bars yet? Or are you still inside the dream?